Behold, my glorious supporter, True Mr.FOoT, has requested some discussion on true Parley alignment. This goes back to a Parley question that Liliana asked in January of this year. Mr.FOoT says, I felt inspired by Liliana's Parley about Parley alignment charts. I enjoyed it a lot, but it felt unrefined. The limiting factor was the traditional layout of that traditional alignment chart with its antiquated alignments. I solved this problem by redefining what alignment is, and thus I present the alignment chart 1.1, 1.0, plus 1.0. A new alignment chart. Let's pause for a moment. If you're not familiar with the antiquated alignment chart, lawful, chaotic, good, evil, and then with neutral in the middle, please go look it up. I think it will make this parlay make way more sense. But I think a lot of you probably are familiar with it. Very popular internet meme, D&D conversation point, because it's bad. It makes your game worse. And I'm actually going to briefly pause here to spend about a minute talking about why. Lawful, chaotic, good, evil, and then there's neutral in the middle. The problem with the alignment chart, in essence, is that it sort of represents the thing it works for in D&D is like creatures alignments, because I would argue we humans do have a sort of innate alignment. We're talking about what you instinctually default to, what most people or creatures of a species or a race kind of instinctually default to. And I would argue that humans are neutral evil. Now remember, evil here means selfish and good means selfless. I don't think humans are innately selfless. A creature could be innately selfless, I suppose. Tritons in D&D are supposedly, lawful good. You can be a chaotic good Triton. I have one in my game right now, just by them deciding that they want to adhere to those principles, that they want to try to act that way. But alignment, what alignment doesn't work for is like, my personality is this alignment. No, it isn't. You're starting with, neutral evil is what I would argue humans are. You start with something, you can disagree about what it is, and then you could, most people act all 9 ways on that alignment chart pretty regularly, I would argue. They resemble those attitudes. So there is no like picking an alignment like on that alignment chart, right? You sort of are innately one of them and also innately all of them in 2 different ways. And the third way you could be on the alignment chart, like which way you're deciding to act or whatever, I would argue just doesn't really exist. It doesn't represent a normal conscious agent very effectively. And I would argue that D&D 5th edition doesn't attempt to make it represent a normal conscious agent. If you play D&D, talk to your DM about maybe just not having alignment on your character sheet, because it doesn't mean anything. Anyway, let's move on. Those are, in my estimation, the problems with the normal alignment chart that took 2 minutes instead of 1, but come on, that was okay. So we have a new one. Mr.FOoT says, you know the deal. Put people who ask Parley or Parley questions, your choice, I'll be doing Parley questions, into their corresponding boxes to try to explain your reasoning. Have fun. I think I will. Thank you. This looks like quite a bit of fun. We're going to get rid of this because it'd be here for the whole time. So let's read them. We got one axis, philosopher, conformist, and enjoyer of things. I guess this one is like how abstract the Parley question is, and then enjoyer of things is like, like things that are very concrete. Okay, so how abstract or concrete it is. And then the other axis is obviously how hot sauce spicy the question is. How I guess like how much of a curveball the question is, right? How much I read the question and say, why? So what I'm going to do is open up my Pantaloon Saloon channel here. I'm going to look at my recent videos on there, and we're going to start filling out the chart. I'm going to stand up, and we'll start putting them on there. So I think it's very helpful when you do these, when you fill out any chart like this, or when you're trying to think about, it could be a lot of things. It could be elements of game design, or organizing, or figuring out what you want to do in different situations, things like that. It's very helpful, to go for extremes first. So it doesn't behoove us to focus on big brain, spicy, and conformist right now. We should look for like what's the most comfortable parlay question I can see in all of these that I'm looking at. Let's get that one on there. What's the most feral parlay question on there? Just the most anarchical, like you the person asking the parlay didn't even really know what you were going to get out of this, and I think that makes this a little easier. Let's start with the feral category, and I think we're going to do feet question mark was a parlay question that I got. Is that, where is that on this side? Philosopher, conformist, enjoyer of things. I guess feet are a thing. The parlay wasn't really about things. I'm gonna put it here for now and then move on. And then again, we might move some of these. We might realize, oh, actually, relative to this other question, it should really be here. And it's not going to be perfect. I'd be curious if people disagree. I'm sure they will. Okay, how about something more philosophical? So my eyes caught by this another True Mr.FOoT one. Are proper discussions on Twitch possible? That one to me was a comfortable philosopher question, almost purely abstract, but something that is really in the ballpark of what I have to discuss. I have a feeling that might be this big brain one though. Like it is a little less comfortable. I did have to come up with solutions, but it was quite in my ballpark, you know? So I'm going to say discussions on Twitch. Oh, no. Twitch discussions? Which discuss Twitch. Sure. There we go. This is going to be the other mini game, is to abbreviate these already abbreviated parlay requests even more. Okay. Do I hate humanity? This wasn't exactly what the question was, but yeah, I guess I felt sort of comfortable about that one. That could be like a comfortable philosopher one, the way I answered it anyway. Hate humanity, does that fit? Hey, look at this. See, easy. So we'll put some more on here. I'll try to do the more recent ones. Does your build need a bus schedule? Yeah, I think the bus metaphor is kind of spicy. It's pretty philosophy heavy. I'm gonna say like the whole bus schedule, iPatch Notes bus schedule saga will be a sort of spicy philosopher one. That one has been difficult to mentally abstract, you know, but I really like, for me, it's been a really flow parlay series, because it's hard for me to focus on, you know, the abstract concepts of a bus metaphor, but then also all these buildcraft concepts, but really, really interesting. Is bottle damage better than lamp damage? But that's, I would say my answer was the feral thing. It was a pretty reasonable game design question. So I don't know about that one. The whole thing about bottle damage, lamp damage, glass blower class, corn farmer thing. I'm not sure about that one. Do video game genres really mean anything? This is a good conformist one. I'm worried about the word conformist because it implies that it's bad, you know? It totally isn't. Just a balance of, I would almost say like a pragmatic question. A balance of being overly material to the point of being obvious, and overly philosophical to the point of being air that nobody can hold on to. The conformist category for me is a good thing. It means you're sort of managing the balance between something being abstract but like still like anchored to the ground, you know. So yeah, I feel like the video game genre thing, but it was still a really comfortable question for me. Game genre. Now I feel bad about, well, okay. No, we'll leave the capitalization. There's a method to the madness, but maybe it'll frustrate people. Who knows? What's the point of camping anyway? That was a to me like a pretty grounded with physical objects, but still, you know, a bit out there as a question of like, do you even gain anything from going camping? You know, I don't think that's a hot take, but it isn't. Well, anyway, it's like this is like for me and the person who requested it, right? And so it wasn't. It was between being comfortable and spicy for me. Like I really enjoyed. Again, it was a good flow. The big brain and spicy ones are a very good flow state for me. A compromise between something that I know I have things to say about, but I'm not entirely sure what those things are. That's a good balance. So that yeah, that's something. I think the universal songs. I'm just gonna say songs. The why do some songs seem to go with everything one makes me think of it's a very material one and a subject that I felt like I had an answer quicker than most other recent Parley. So I'll put that one there. We're really filling things out. We got to get some more spicy ones. What were some just really savage ones? Ooh, let's see. Does this, I'm just going to start reading Parley names. Does this Tokyo Ghoul OP cause me physical pain? It didn't. That one would have been spicy enjoyer of things. No, I don't know. I don't know about that one. Does virtual reality threaten to destroy the future? That was quite comfortable to me. I don't think it's a better example than any of these. That's going to be how a lot of them are. And I think this is an interesting part in and of itself. It says something about how I felt about these, that I'm looking at them and I'm like, there weren't any like feral ones. So I thought, but you know, plenty of them have just been weird, right? Mr.FOoT, I suspect that you would like me to place your Business Zeus Parley, so let's do that. Who is Business Zeus and why should we care? Spicy conformist, kind of a balance between like, okay, so like you're probably talking about Hades, but then it's just, what is this question, you know? And it was, well, that might be as close as we get to the feral category for how I felt about these. So maybe I'm gonna say, I hope Business Zeus fits. It does, yay. Cool. All right, yeah, I would say like relative to how I feel about Parley most of the time, that was that. You know, there were a bunch of spicy, like hot take Parleys a while ago. Maybe I should go back more. Yeah, we should do that. Okay. Let's see. Something that occurs to me for the enjoyer of things spicy would be like, should you use the Warframe mobile app, for example? It is abstract to think about, like, is it worth using it to people? You know, it's funny when people say, you know, is it worth it to play? Is it worth it to get, you know, Sevagoth or whatever new Warframe or this game that you're playing or whatever, right? What's always kind of weird about that to me is that it's a very complicated question. You know, people think of it as like yes, no, that's usually what they get, but it is inherently, if you answer it in a useful way, a very complex question. I don't know, you know, like, is it? And I think it, you know, it was challenging. It required some work too, but also was very practical. You know, it was an enjoyer of things one. Yeah, so I'll say like the Warframe app is like at least a good example of that. Let's see. Ooh, I liked this one. Is censorship even effective in the first place? The idea that like censoring things actually makes it worse in some way. I thought that was like, maybe not for me or the person who asked it, but in society broadly, I do think that's like somewhat of a hot take, for legislators anyway. So I'm gonna put that here for now. Sure. Okay. And again, like, I think maybe this is just me. Like, I just don't think I think of almost any parlay questions, any questions as being like beyond spicy. To me, it's just like, it's not, I don't know. I don't think there's anything that any of you could say that I would be like really shocked. Like, whoa, we're talking about this. Like, I'm just not that kind of person. I've thought of it all before, but I, not all of it, of course. I just mean, I wouldn't be like, humans think that. Like, no, that's naive, of course. I'm perfectly aware that people have thoughts like that. But I think that, relative to everything else, these were the ones that are, it's sort of another aspect of this feral category. I'm really having trouble explaining what I'm trying to say, is like how much other people think, like, what even is this parlay? You know what I mean? Or like, oh wow, it's really saying something to maybe something that is total nonsense, but to put out there, like, I think as you go from comfortable to the feral end of the spectrum, you're getting in the direction of parlays that like would be something new to the listener, is what I'm trying to get at. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble constructing this. Like, this parlay is probably like in the spicy conformist for being something that balances. It is somewhat material, but also requires a lot of interpretation. I think is more in the philosopher, pushes it out of enjoyer of things. We're moving all these little parts, but it's also like this abstract concept. Talk about the D&D alignment chart too. That's what I call it, but you know what I mean. The traditional, I think, is also fairly abstract. Okay, conformist big brain. We are going to kill ourselves about filling out every part of the chart, because I was easier than I thought, to at least put some on the board. I'm usually pretty analysis paralysis about this kind of stuff. Okay. Let's see. Did I pick up Buildcraft from D&D? What even was the question for that one, though? Let's listen. Behold, my glorious supporter Axio requests some discussion about Dungeons and Dragons. That's right, it's finally happened, folks. Axio has a long request that I'm going to read here. I wanted to ask you to do a video compiling your thoughts of Dungeons and Dragons and how similar it might or might not be to how you like playing Warframe with the Framework project. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, so I would say this one is there. D&D Buildcraft Origins, I think would be, for me, a sort of like pretty middle of the road. It's a pretty targeted. That was a big brain question, because you're exactly right. But a good balance of this, rooted in a thing, a game, a material activity I did, but then also abstracting that to, this other thing. I also, again, I kind of talked before about how feral is sort of relative to what I think about parlay and what parlays get asked. And this other column is also relative, or this other column, this other axis. The parlays that are requested are almost all relatively philosophical. So, enjoyer of things is relative. It just has some anchoring, and you can see the enjoyer of things category is really like a specific thing, a specific thing, a specific thing, a specific, well, a specific thing, question mark. And then from there it goes up to these more broad, even just reading my tiny little titles that I quickly wrote. The philosopher category is like all of them that you read besides the Twitch one. It's like, whereas the enjoyer of things one, you think like, yeah, the parlay's mostly about music, the parlay's mostly about camping, the parlay's mostly about the Warframe app, the parlay's mostly about feet. So I do think the enjoyer of things category is a little bit more to like almost more focused. I think there's an element of them just being more targeted, which I feel like is another difference. For the philosopher one, it gets more abstract, so my response is also a lot more open-ended. The philosopher category, I would almost say like how the response you got from me is this focused or not, and then the other axis is like I was more or less ready to give that response or like comfortable, not like emotionally comfortable, but you know what I mean. Like I was less of a mental exercise to provide that response. The game genre thing, like the hate humanity thing and the songs thing, I kind of had the full answer in my head before the question was even asked. Like I knew I could have answered, I kind of have answered that at other times in my life, and I was quite ready to ask that thing. As with this previous alignment chart, I want to stop here and mention I do not dislike those parlay. I started Parley partially because I wanted to be better at interpreting people's desires or intentions and figuring out how I can adapt my own thinking to give people a response that they would prefer. It's the same reason that I like DMing in D&D. I want to understand what other people want and figure out how to do it. It's not any fun to play by yourself. I mean, except all the times where it is, but you know what I mean. I have my own, I think plenty about myself. I think enough about myself. I'm interested in trying to understand, you're asking something about me a lot of the time, but to understand that through maybe your perspective a little more, or how can I explain this that is a good way to show it to other people, given limited time. It's also, I think, pretty fulfilling to try to balance the parlay request with the amount of time I can reasonably spend on that request, figuring out how to use very limited resources and not to overcommit to one parlay when I have a bunch of other stuff to do, while still giving you the best response in a limited amount of time that I'm currently able to give. And also just like I change day to day, managing my daily life and my weeks so that I like give a response at the time during my free time when I can give a good response. I was a little bit intimidated by this one at first, so I waited until, you can probably tell, I was really ready and felt quite solid and ready to talk about a thing. And this has gone far better than I thought. Because I did that. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, just to say those comfortable ones are a time when I don't do that. And one of the reasons that they all go as relatively smoothly as I hope you think they do is because there's a mix of questions. So please don't think that comfortable conformist makes it look bad. Like our culture has sort of a pejorative about that. No judgment here. Like I like those. I like all of them, really. I enjoyed all of these parlay greatly. So please don't feel bad at all. Anyway, what else do I have to say? So that was the comfortable category a little bit. Like I less had to come up with a totally new thing about what I had to say. Or the mental legwork. It was less me doing the legwork of figuring out what I think and more the legwork of figuring out how to describe what I thought. And then the big brain category is a little over dramatic. You could gripe about the category names all day, but I feel like I understand the meaning fine enough. They're functional, right? I think they're funny. Is a category where, the big brain meme has a little bit of a pejorative in the meme culture as being, it's not, it ain't rocket science, but it is, like, oh, huh. The Twitch discussion thing I thought was really like, yeah, we really should talk about that, shouldn't we? Things that I have something to say about, sort of ahead of time, but I read the question and think that is a good thing for us to talk about. Like like I should have made a video about that already, which I can now relatively easily do. I'm not saying all of these actually were easy. That discussing Twitch one, I did a few takes of that one was challenging, but the D&D origins and the camping one like required some mental elasticity, but were largely things that I thought, yeah, like I can totally see why somebody would ask this. And I feel like I too have asked this before and have some beginnings of thoughts about this topic. The D&D thing, this has a little bit of an undercurrent of D&D in it, but you all really did influence me a lot with D&D. I had really kind of put that game behind me a little bit because of my really limited and totally inadequate experience in high school. where I might as well not have played it. And I don't really even remember because it was so immaterial. It meant so little to me. It just sort of, you know, I remember one moment from all the time I played D&D before the past year. And it's because of all of you, because I said I thought it wouldn't be a good build crafting game. You all said you're really missing out. There is a lot there. And you're right, it's an absolute treat. There's a really interesting way that you can marry the build options with role-playing and synergizing with your friends, and that's really fun. It's a really fun way to apply build options, and also has a multiclassing in particular, I think is a very compelling build system. Really interesting consequences. So yeah, it was really great. Thank you to those of you who did that. And obviously the parlay didn't hurt for me to understand the impact that it did have on me. Sort of showed me a fantasy that I thought, I guess this just doesn't work. But, you know, now that I've come back to it with just better friends, honestly, I'm really having a lot of fun. So I owe you all a thank you for that. I'm not sure I have too much to say about the rest. Obviously Spicy and Feral are, you know, you're moving further on the spectrum that way. And I don't think I have a lot else to say. But yeah, this was fun. I hope you thought it was fun. I had a good time cataloging some of the parlay questions. Yeah, again, I would love to hear if people have different takes on what these axes mean. Could these be useful for something other than the parlay questions? Do I dare suggest that you could use these for your D&D character? Because I do think that these are decent sort of like mental processing biases, if you will. They don't describe, they're not, you know, alignment in D&D, as I kind of described, as in real life, I think, is there could be three things. Your sort of starting or natural alignment, that is your predisposition by pretty much instincts, maybe culture, I suppose, but they kind of go hand in hand. Your basically like way of reacting to situations and your range of behaviors, which I think is a little different. And as I was discussing at the beginning of this parlay, I think that the first and the third thing are not alignment. Like they're just kind of set. You can use the D&D alignment chart for the first thing, but humans, I would argue, it's just neutral evil. There's no discussion, there's no choice. Things just are a thing. And then if you say like, I'm playing a human that is lawful good, it sounds like what you mean is you're a human that, relative to other human beings, chooses to do things that feel more selfless and structured than other people. Your innate or sort of base alignment has not changed. You probably feel close to a different creature that has a base alignment of lawful good. But the third thing, the sort of the behaviors that you exhibit, is just the whole alignment chart. So again, it's sort of not useful. There's really nothing to discuss or choose. And then it's that second thing, that kind of like how your sort of your process for thinking about things. And my criticism at the beginning of this parlay is that the lawful, chaotic, good, evil alignment chart doesn't work for that. That's not really how people do that, I would argue. Conscious agents that are free thinking do not think that's not a thing. But I kind of think they do this. I think they sort of do this thing. And I don't think this is represented by mental ability scores in D&D. This is like how much of an abstract thinker you are versus how much of a concrete thinker. You might initially think that being an abstract thinker means you have a high intelligence stat, but I don't think so at all. I think that, like having a high investigation skill check, concrete material thinking can exhibit extraordinarily high intelligence. It is simply how you choose to process the information around you. I'll be honest, I do think that being able to think abstractly does demonstrate some higher intelligence, but we're talking like you go from 10 to 12. You know what I mean? Like there's no galaxy brain moment here. People that are, not that smart, sure, are probably thinking more concretely, but I don't think it requires you being a genius to get to the point where you can do both, and it's a matter of which one you tend to do more. Maybe your learning style is kind of a different way to think about that. So that axis of like sort of how materially or immaterially you think, how your thinking is grounded, does feel like something that D&D doesn't currently effectively encapsulate, but does effectively describe how, real conscious agents actually think. Okay, so what about the other one? How much of a mental leap do you make? This might be a little bit more covered by D&D's scores, if you don't mind me focusing on that system as an example. But I do think it's true that people's sort of creativity isn't perfectly captured by intelligence, although I do think there's an element of like extrapolating or making a logical leap. Wisdom, although I do think that experience and intuition play some part in making a creative or unintuitive or unusual conclusion, or charisma, although I do think that your personality dictates which kind of thinking you tend to do. But we can probably all agree that you can be charismatic while being pretty expected, but doing things that are rather expected. That can be charismatic. And being very unexpected can also be very charismatic. So I do think that this alignment axis does kind of do the job of, D&D alignment for like what people are sort of trying to use it for a lot of the time, which is what your disposition is, sort of. Much better. Alignment simply does not represent that. I would argue objectively that's not how conscious agents think, but this maybe kind of is. Thoughts? What do you think? I think that's an interesting little granule, and in fact, yeah, this did end up being a very good spot for this Parley question. A lot of fun, Mr. Foot. Thank you.